pass soon.
This is bull. I'm not selling this land until everything is perfectly fair and we do this the right way. Sorry.
It's a standoff at the Coyote Pass.
What you're about to hear is not just another recap of the Brown family saga, it's a revelation that's been quietly simmering beneath the surface for years. A tangled story stitched together from insider whispers, financial breadcrumbs, and hidden legal maneuvers that may finally explain everything we've been questioning about the empire Kody Brown once controlled. It all began with a book.
Her name is Robyn, and she would never let me do anything naughty. As bad as I want to do it.
A book that not only told a story, but set the Browns off their tiny niche in the world of reality TV and into international stardom. Christine herself once remarked, "We wanted to share our story with the world. We felt it was important." And for a while, that choice appeared to be genius. The book didn't just give fans a glimpse into the complexities of plural marriage. It made the Browns' household names. It made them wealthy. But here's the shocking twist. According to explosive reports that we're breaking down today, the very man they trusted, the one they stood beside in promoting that book, may have secretly stolen the profits. What we're talking about here goes far beyond marital spats or bitter divorces. This is a narrative that cuts right to the core of their family dynasty. A tale of purported intellectual property swindling, financial deceit, and such deep-seated betrayal that it might totally destroy all the Browns accomplished. If divorces so far were dramatic, hold on to your seat. This hypothesis may be the worst revelation so far, because when trust, money, and influence meet, the damage is never minor. Before we dig through layers of contracts, clandestine amendments, and shadowy bank accounts, do me one quick thing. If you love these deep dives, hit that like button immediately. It tells YouTube you want more content like this. And if you're not already subscribed, join our community because you won't want to miss a single update as this saga unfolds. Now buckle up. Let's travel back in time, back to the time when the Browns were at the peak of their glory. The year was 2011. Sister Wives was not only surviving, it was thriving. The family had escaped Utah, evaded the specter of prosecution, and settled into their now famous cul-de-sac in Las Vegas. They had rebranded themselves as the relatable, unconventional next-door family, and viewers around the globe were hooked. From a commercial perspective, choosing to write Becoming Sister Wives was sheer genius. It wasn't a book, much less a series of books. It was a brand expansion, an opportunity to frame their own story and narrate it in their own words. They could highlight the challenges, the jealousy, the heartache, but also the faith, the solidarity, and the joy. It was genuine, no holds barred, and intimate, and the risk paid off. Overnight, the book was a New York Times bestseller. That wasn't a vanity title, that was a big financial success. The royalties created an entire new source of income, aside from TLC's payments. For the first time, the Browns had something that was all their own, a product in the form of intellectual property developed out of their real lives. But let's stop for a moment and actually consider what that book was peddling. It wasn't Kody's much ballyhooed leadership. It wasn't Robyn's jewelry designs. No, the soul of that book was the tales of four women. Mary, laying bare her hurt as the original wife and the messy truth of embracing new wives. Janelle, independent to the core, navigating from in-law to sister wife. Christine, the dreamer, whose vision of plural marriage came cruelly into conflict with the harsh realities of jealousy and abandonment. And Robyn, the new bride whose entrance rearranged the entire family structure. Every wife bared her soul on those pages, her memories, her tragedy, her faith, her heartbreak. And the first agreement honored that sacrifice. The publishing contract, sources say, recognized all 5 authors, 4 wives, 1 husband, equally entitled to shares of the profits. It worked for a time, that system. Royalties were deposited, bills were paid, mortgages paid, and the money folded beautifully into the family pot. In a family home with 18 children, financial lines were fuzzy, but that was life in the Browns' world. But here's the question. What if that shared trust starts to fracture? What if a once unified family starts to break apart? That same money, the token of their collective achievement, becomes a tool, a weapon, and whoever controls the account controls the power. This is where the specter of manipulation and control comes into play, because hidden amongst the paperwork is an organization that the majority of the fans had never even heard of, an LLC named Dabsark. On the surface, it sounds like just another business deal. But as you read further, the reality is disturbing. Dabsark stands for Dayton, Aurora, Brianna, Solomon, Ariella, and Kody. Can you spot who is missing? All of the original 13 Brown children. All of the original wives, Mary, Janelle, and Christine. Even their names were deleted from the very framework that professed to symbolize the family. Publicly, Dabsark was explained as a means to simplify finances. In private, Janelle and Christine apparently realized what it actually was: a legal method, a means to an end for Kody, under Robyn's control, to centralize power and quietly funnel money into his new existence. Now, let's be explicit. LLCs are standard for reality TV clans. They're not illicit in and of themselves. They can shield property and even make taxes easier. But fair or foul comes down to one key point: disclosure. Who's in charge of the accounts? Who gets signing authority? Who makes decisions where the money is spent? And this is where the bombshell theory breaks. Insiders claim that Kody arranged for Dabsark so that he, and he alone, had the power of the signature. One guy with his hands on all the money, the wives, whose life stories and sacrifices constructed the book, were supposedly relegated to dependents, having to seek permission in order to use funds that were rightfully theirs. It gets worse. Sources claim that after the book became a bestseller, Kody quietly pushed through a secret amendment, something we'll call the Royalty Redirection Addendum. This addendum allegedly instructed the publisher to stop paying royalties directly to the 5 co-authors. Instead, every dollar of profit would now flow into the Dabsark account. And who signed this amendment? Not the wives, not all 5 co-authors. Just one name: Kody Brown. Christine, Janelle, and probably Mary were supposedly never told. They thought the funds were still coming into the shared fund, being spent on the family just as before. They were raising kids, taping, and keeping the house going meanwhile, completely oblivious that Kody had changed the rules. In one pen movement, he had eliminated them from the royalties they'd worked for. It was a quiet coup. And it would not be until almost a decade later that the truth would emerge into light. And how does a secret remain such a well-guarded one? It's chillingly simple: control. Kody controlled the finances, he controlled the stories, he paid the bills, issued the allowances, and kept enough stability in place to ward off questions. To outsiders, the family appeared to be running on all cylinders. Tense, perhaps, but intact. Behind closed doors, however, cracks were beginning to show. The relocation from Las Vegas to Flagstaff broke whatever tentative balance had been established. The vision of one big house on Coyote Pass dissolved, replaced by financial uncertainty and acrimonious bitterness. Janelle was living in an RV, struggling desperately to gain traction. Christine was stuck in a house she despised, in a city that sucked her energy out, feeling increasingly like a single mom in every way but name. And all the while, Kody and Robyn had their $1 million house, sheltered from the sacrifices his other wives were making. For Christine, the unraveling started when she finally broke away from Kody. Suddenly, she required her own financial records, evidence of her income to get a home in Utah. TLC checks, her MLM business, for sure. But the book that had made them a bestseller family, the book that had brought them fame and fortune, where was her portion of that money? And that question, audiences, would be the starting of the demise. Christine recognized that something was not quite right. The book hadn't been a one-time hit. It had continued to sell consistently for years. Even if the profits weren't quite so huge as during those initial bestseller days, they were still a flow of money that, by all rights, belonged in part to her. She had given her life to those pages, and she was owed her due. So she started asking questions. Initially, they were basic, even tentative, requests for financial transparency. But the answers she supposedly received from Kody were anything but clear-cut. Insiders say her questions were answered with brush-offs, vague responses, and flat-out stonewalling. He dismissed her, saying the book hadn't earned much in decades, and whatever little did come in had been plowed back into the family. But let's stop there. Consider that dynamic for a second. Christine wasn't merely a wife requesting grocery funds. She was a co-author, a business partner, a legal interest holder. Requesting to view statements wasn't nosy, it was her due. But Kody supposedly responded to her questions as not legitimate, but as insubordination. He portrayed her question as a defiance of his authority. And for Christine, that was the tipping point. This wasn't just about emotional neglect any longer. This wasn't just about being last on his to-do list. It was about respect, or the dawning realization that she may have been financially exploited for years in the name of family unity. And that's where Janelle comes into the picture. Christine and Janelle always shared a special connection, a team within the bigger marriage. They relied on each other, encouraged each other, and tended to see the cracks in Kody's management before anyone else did. When Christine confided in Janelle about her suspicions, it hit home. Janelle, the practical one, the breadwinner, the wife who had always been the responsible hand with money, suddenly found herself looking at her own circumstances with new eyes. She saw that all these years of dumping earnings into the family, she too had had no access to the Dabsark accounts. No statements, no ability to check, just blind trust in a man who talked of partnership but supposedly withheld control. Christine, and Janelle made a fateful choice together. This was no longer about divorce. This was no longer about dividing homes or dissolving a spiritual marriage. This was about finding the truth. They needed legal assistance, not for custody, not for division of property, but for an investigation of finances. They needed to examine the books. They needed to trace the money, and what they discovered, according to leaks from insiders, was much worse than they could have anticipated: a decade's worth of deception and financial legerdemain. Let's dissect the crux of this supposed court case, because this isn't hearsay. It might be a ruinous courtroom fight based on two central allegations: fraud and conversion. Fraud, legally, is deliberate deception to gain an unfair advantage. To establish it, Christine and Janelle's lawyers would have to demonstrate a number of things. 1. A false representation. Kody posing as the money manager, working in all their best interests while secretly altering contracts and diverting payments. The deception wasn't in what he said, it was in what he didn't say. He left out the truth. 2nd, knowledge of falsity. He was the sole signer of that clandestine addendum. He was well aware of what he was doing when he wired money into an account he controlled. 3rd, intent to deceive. The whole idea of concealment was to keep the wives ignorant. If they didn't realize the arrangement had been altered, they couldn't dispute their portion. 4th, justified reliance. The wives were not fools to have trusted him. In a plural marriage founded on mutual faith and commitment, naturally they trusted their husband to deal with money honestly. That trust was the very coinage of their household. And lastly, damages. The economic damage is obvious. Years of royalties drained away, leaving nothing to Christine and Janelle from an asset they had a hand in developing. The second charge, conversion, is even easier. It's the civilian version of stealing, appropriating someone else's property and keeping it for yourself. In this case, the property in question was the royalty funds. Both wives were entitled to some share, no matter how you cut it, as 20% for each of the 5 writers or 25% pieces of the wives' total share. Either way, that money didn't belong to Kody to squander, and still, by pouring it into Dabsark and spending it on living with Robyn, he purportedly converted their property into his own. So this is not just a tearful appeal from outraged ex-wives. It's a skillfully crafted legal case, one founded in contract law and property rights. The story takes a sharp turn. Suddenly, all those arguments over Coyote Pass, the resentment over household differences, the constant griping about finances, these aren't just the wreckage of a plural marriage. That was headed for disaster. They are the direct result of a potentially criminal financial conspiracy that enriched one household at the expense of the others. And then there's the most incriminating piece of all, Exhibit A. Every trial drama has its smoking gun, and here, it would be the original publishing agreement for becoming sister wives. Picture the scene: a Flagstaff courtroom. Christine and Janelle seated with their attorneys, Kody and Robyn glaring from across the aisle, the tension thick enough to choke on. The plaintiff's lawyer rises and hands the judge a document. Your Honor, Exhibit A, the original publishing contract, dated 2012. The agreement is simple: 5 co-authors as equal partners. Not the Brown family, not Kody and wives, but 5 people, each due a 20% cut. Kody's defense, without a doubt, would heavily rely on the family pot rule. He would contest that all they did financially was shared, that as household head, it was his duty to take care of all monies. He'd assert that he paid for the royalties out of mortgages, bills, and the family's general upkeep. But then, Exhibit A2, the addendum. 8 months later, one new signature: Kody Brown. No wives, no consent. Just one man quietly steering each royalty check into an account that he alone controls. The attorney would ask Christine, "Ever see this document prior to this case?" Christine would reply, "No." "Did you ever grant permission to Kody to sign? In your place, redirecting your income into an LLC with which you had no control?" Her response, we can imagine, would be resolute. Absolutely not. Janelle would provide the same responses. Combined, their testimony would pierce to the heart of the charge of fraud. This was not mismanagement. It was misrepresentation. Kody was pretending to have their authority when he did not. He put on the patriarchal hat, but legally, he assumed their rights. And here's the thing. In the cold, clinical language of contract law, family pot arguments don't matter. What matters are signatures, paper trails, consent. And the absence of Christine's, Janelle's, and Mary's signatures would scream louder than any testimony. The contract, once a symbol of unity, would become the ultimate evidence of betrayal. And yet, the paper trail is only part of the story. Because once the lawyers started following the money, the true extent of the damage would finally be revealed. And that, viewers, is what we're going to uncover next. But a contract is nothing but ink on paper. To understand the full weight of the betrayal, you don't simply look at signatures, you track the path of dollars. And that leads us to Exhibit B. This is where forensic accountants come in, the types of specialists who make numbers tell a story. Their task? To take 10 years of royalty statements, bank transfers, and records, and chart a path so easy, so damning, that even Kody couldn't distort it. The publisher's records revealed the first half of the story. In a span of more than 10 years, becoming sister wives earned $482 in royalties. According to the initial deal, Christine and Janelle would have taken home a total of $192, their rightful 40%. But when the accountants placed the publisher's books alongside Kody's LLC books side by side, the reality smacked like a thunderclap. Christine had been paid less than $9,200 out of over $140,000 owed. Janelle, less than $9,800. That's fewer than 24 grand combined. 10 years of work, trust, and loyalty dissipated in scraps. In the meantime, the flowchart told them precisely where the balance went. House mortgage payments on Kody and Robyn's residence, auto notes, credit cards, mysterious cash withdrawals, even so-called personal extravagances prosecutors would term. This wasn't a family jar, this was a personal piggy bank, and Kody held the loan key. That was when the family leader facade cracked. The same man who preached sacrifice, loyalty, and oneness was accused of funding a lifestyle on the backs of the very women who believed in him most. And thus, the trial shifted to its headlining act. Kody Brown sworn in. Imagine it. He enters the courtroom, his suit rigid on his body, his curls a tad too tidied. He attempts to exude self-assurance, but his leg jiggles beneath the table. His attorney has prepared him. Keep cool, repeat the family pot story, don't lose your cool. But Kody's pride has been his weak point. The cross-examination starts. Attorney: Mr. Brown, you've said under oath you handled all family finances, right? Kody: I'm the leader of this family, the head of our corporation. The buck stopped with me. Attorney: And as head, you thought you had the right to sign official documents on behalf of your wives? Kody: We're not a board, we're a family. There has to be a patriarch. Sometimes that means making choices others don't get. The lawyer pushes Exhibit A2 across the table. The secret addendum. Lawyer: Did you ever sit down with your wives and get their signatures before diverting their personal royalties into your private LLC? Kody: It was implied. An oral agreement. They trusted me. They didn't need access. They had me. And there it was. The admission shrouded in arrogance. But the lawyer wasn't done yet. He produced the bank records. Attorney: Can you demonstrate to me, Mr. Brown, where money was saved in the line item for Coyote Pass? The attorney pauses, browsing through the records. Attorney: Because what I see here are lingerie buys, personal credit card statements, payments on your house. Tell me, Mr. Brown, how precisely does a $500 charge at a lingerie shop benefit the whole family? Kody stammers. His cool shatters. He resorts to his usual crutch: being a victim. They betrayed me. I bore the weight. I gave them all I had, and they turned against me. And in a courtroom, acting doesn't destroy facts. His own words, his assertion that their funds were his to manage, sealed his fate. The judge, not impressed by patriarchal bluster, would recognize it for what it was: not leadership, not loyalty, but fraud and conversion laid bare. The closing arguments were all but redundant. The paper trail, the unsigned documents, the stream of money, and Kody's testimony itself all spoke with one voice. This wasn't just marital infidelity, it was deliberate financial exploitation. The courtroom fell silent as the judge re-entered. Having reviewed the evidence, the court is prepared to give its verdict. The judge's words sliced through the courtroom, crisp and definitive. On the issue of Brown and Brown versus Brown, this court finds for the plaintiffs. And with that, it was finished. Kody Brown, the would-be patriarch, the one who insisted on loyalty and respect from all those who moved in his orbit, was duly labeled by the court as responsible for fraud by intentional misrepresentation and for the tort of conversion. In simple terms, he lied and stole. Christine and Janelle sat in silence, but the expression in their eyes spoke volumes. A surge of relief, confirmation. After years of being gaslit, belittled, and treated as collateral, a court of law had finally proved what they knew all along. Kody had stolen from them, but the gavel hadn't yet fallen. The judge yet had one final bomb to drop: the monetary award. And this, friends, is where the fireworks really started. The figures were astronomical. The court recognized that becoming sister wives had accrued approximately $350,000 in royalties. And according to the original 5-author deal, Christine and Janelle were due their 25% shares of the wives' joint amount. The arithmetic was irrefutable. Kody was instructed to pay $87,500 to Janelle and $87,500 to Christine for a total of $175,000. But the judge wasn't done, because this wasn't about unpaid royalties alone, it was about punishment, about consequences. He added punitive damages, citing the sheer maliciousness of Kody's fraud. With that addition, the judgment edged closer to $250,000. And then the verbal punch, a slap that had no price tag to match. Staring Kody in the face, the judge exposed the reality of the whole drama. The defendant's greatest asset has ever been his wives' narratives. He commodified their trauma, their spirituality, and their existences to the masses. He constructed a business empire not through his own entrepreneurial efforts, but on the currency of their emotional labor. To subsequently steal the profits from the same women whose narratives generated this profit is an act of extreme betrayal and sheer thievery. This was not leadership. This was theft. Larceny. A judge publicly labeling Kody Brown a thief. For a man who lives for respect more than anything in the world, who structured his self-image around power and control, this was a humiliation so complete it will define him for the remainder of his life. The verdict had come in. Justice had been served. But for the Browns, it was just the start, because Kody now owed. And how does a man reportedly land rich but cash poor accumulate almost $250,000? The solution takes us to the last asset standing in his crumbling empire, Coyote Pass. Insiders say Kody doesn't have that kind of money sitting in a bank account. The TLC paychecks, we're told, are spent before they even clear, swallowed up by debt and the endless costs of maintaining his life with Robyn. The bank accounts could be seized, but they likely wouldn't cover the judgment. That leaves one option: liquidating assets. And what are Kody's best assets? His pieces of land on Coyote Pass. Yes, the very ground that was to become the Brown family's future, where they hoped to construct side-by-side houses, where Janelle had camped out in an RV back in the day, desperately trying to make it happen. Now, rumors in property records are circulating that Kody might have to sell his own stake just to cover Christine and Janelle. The irony is stark. The forever home that was supposed to hold the family together now can be sliced up and sold to outsiders due to the deception and financial trickery that broke it apart. Picture Janelle, who sweated, sacrificed, and hoped for that land, seeing some stranger move in next door, residing on the very ground she thought would be her legacy. And then there's Robyn, her dream of a family compound, her kids growing up among their siblings, gone in an instant. The property to her side could belong to anyone. A painful reminder that the money supposedly pumped into her household over a decade is the very reason the dream fell through. It is karma at its finest, but the ripple effects do not end there. For two other women would then find themselves standing in the wreckage: Mary and Robyn. Let's begin with Mary, the overlooked wife in so many respects, yet not overlooked in this contract. Her name appeared right there alongside Christine and Janelle's. By the same arithmetic, she was owed her share, approximately $85,500 in damages. She was fraudulently dealt with just the same. The only variation? At the time of this hypothetical lawsuit, she was still married to Kody in a spiritual union. That made things complicated. For years, Mary held on to hope of reconciliation, and suing Kody would have been burning that final tenuous bridge. But now, with her formal separation, the game is different. Filing a lawsuit of her own is no longer inconceivable. It's bargaining power. She might not even have to file. One threatening letter from her attorney might be enough to drive Kody into another settlement. If Christine and Janelle opened the vault, Mary could just walk in and take her piece. And Kody knows this. Now let's discuss Robyn. Although she was not mentioned in the suit, make no mistake, her fingerprints are on this story. The money trail indicates the royalties directly into the home she shared with Kody. In the court of public opinion, she doesn't appear to be a victim. She appears to be an accomplice. Some even speculate she was the mastermind. And that's the actual tragedy for Robyn. Because regardless of how many tears she cries, no matter how many times she protests that she merely wanted family harmony, this conviction redeems her. All those pleas, all those sobs, all those perfectly constructed images of herself as the family mediator now appear to be a facade for the fact that her family stood to gain the most by the robbery. So where are Kody and Robyn? With an ego bruised, finances destroyed, and resentment brewing on both of their parts, Kody will blame Christine. He'll blame Janelle. But behind closed doors, when the cameras and lights are off, some of that blame will land on Robyn, the wife he allegedly gave it all up for. And what about the largest question of them all? What is to become of the show? Because how do Sister Wives go on from here? TLC established its brand on offbeat, eccentric families. But there is a difference between unusual and criminal. Kody Brown, the star of their breakout show, has now been labeled a fraud and a thief by a court of law. How do you shoot that? How do you sell that? The network would be facing a PR disaster. Reality contracts all include morals clauses, and a conviction for civil fraud could be the perfect excuse TLC needs to let Kody go. And the wives? How are Janelle, Christine, or even Mary supposed to film with a man who is taken from them? It's a poisoned workplace waiting to blow. The fans are already turning on Kody. Advertisers would be spooked. Ratings would plummet. Most likely this sentence would signal the demise of Sister Wives as we know it. Could TLC switch? Definitely. A spin-off featuring Christine, Janelle, and Mary would virtually guarantee success. Surviving Sister Wives. Life after Kody. A rebranding based on autonomy rather than oppression. But the original dynasty? Finito. And that's the last cruel irony. The family dynasty Kody established on his wives' narratives. Their sweat, their suffering, their sacrifice, collapses because he was caught stealing the very essence he profited from them. So what is left? A tale that started out as an exercise in faith and family, but was ultimately reduced to the oldest story of all, greed. Christine and Janelle's lawsuit was not merely about money. It was about getting power back, about asserting that even after decades of manipulation and control, they could rise up, speak up, and reclaim what was rightfully theirs. And perhaps, just perhaps, it is the real end to Kody Brown's patriarchal reign. Not on a wedding day, not on a divorce day, but on a judge declaring him what he truly is. A thief. But what do you guys think? Was this judgment unavoidable? Do you see Mary coming forward next and taking her entitlement? And how is Robyn going to weather the shock when the empire she so tirelessly sought to dominate falls in around her? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one of them. If you'd like to see more deep dives like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with another Sister Wives fan who needs to hear the truth. Because if this saga shows us anything, it's that secrets don't stay buried forever. And Kody Brown just learned that the hard way.